Welcome to Annette on America. Annette Bybee here, college professor, lawyer, and single mom to 3 teenage girls. And I don't know about you, but I survived the eclipse. Here in Colorado, we really just had a partial eclipse of the sun, not a total eclipse. So, it wasn't terribly exciting. It was more annoying, really, to see for months on end people talking on social media about the huge importance of this eclipse. And, I believe in watching the skies for signs and things, but I just can't see that it's hugely important. It's just that the moon passed in front of the sun. So now people are saying that it's 40 days until something else happens. So I don't tend to get into these discussions on Facebook with folks because it's a rabbit hole. I'd rather watch Blue Bloods than go down a rabbit hole with people who think that something big is going to happen after the eclipse. That's just me. But one thing that I did want to say to the folks on Facebook that I didn't is that when the Bible says 40 days and 40 nights, they don't really mean 40 days and 40 nights. It's just an expression, a long time, right? So the people that are counting the 40 days from the eclipse, I really wish they wouldn't wake up on the 40th day and say, here it is, whatever it is that's supposed to be happening. Anyway, the thought that keeps passing through my mind through the eclipse and everything else that's going on is that we do not live in boring times. We just don't. Everything means something. Everything is a conspiracy. Everything is more important than it really is. A barge doesn't just hit a bridge. The moon doesn't just pass in front of the sun. Everything's got to have huge importance attached to it. It's interesting. Anyway, what I feel like is by the way, if you missed last week's episode, you should really go back and listen to it because I had the Libertarian presidential candidate on and he made a pretty dire prediction about the country because of our debt. And it's had me losing sleep for a while and thinking, boy, let's all have our food storage ready and our water storage and everything else. I may have to have my prep expert on again soon because if what he said is right, we really don't have a lot of hope. So you're now thinking, what the heck, Annette? What are you talking about? Well, go find the episode. Go to AnnetteTalks.com, go to YouTube, Rumble, podcast provider, and find it and find out what he said. And then, I would be really curious to have you report back to me and tell me if you think he's right or not. You can shoot me an email at Annette@AnnetteTalks.com and let me know. Today, what I wanted to talk about is the topic, the issue that a lot of us thought we would never have to really deal with again until the decision that overturned Roe v. Wade came out. And now it's huge because abortion was one of the deciding factors during the midterm election, which helped win, or it helped the red wave turn into a little tiny red trickle. And now that we have this presidential election coming up, we have the issue come to the fore again because of a few things. Well, for number one, Arizona just had this state Supreme Court ruling that said that Arizona must enforce the 1864 abortion ban that contains no exceptions for rape or incest. So, this 160-year-old law criminalizing abortions except in cases where the mother's life is in danger can go into effect, the Grand Canyon State's highest court ruled Tuesday, teeing up a likely ballot initiative in a closely watched election battleground. So that's not going to be good. I mean, we all know that this law is not going to stand in Arizona, or not for long anyway. This is really not a real issue. But it gives the left a huge platform to jump up on and say, look, abortion is going to be illegal in Arizona. Look at this is terrible. let's all remember this is November, right? That's what's going to happen with this. That's really what the excuse they're going to use here is that this, because we already have Arizona for abortion access has over 500,000 signatures to put a ballot measure forward. So this is a small issue, but of course, we have Democrats making hay of it. It's a dark day in Arizona. We are just 14 days away from one of the most extreme abortion bans in the country, Democratic Governor Katie Hobbs declared shortly after the decision was handed down. But my message to Arizona women is this: I won't rest, and I won't stop fighting until we have secured the right to abortion. That is my promise to you. Until we can have the right to kill our own babies in our own wombs, I won't stop. Okay, that last part I added, but it's the same thing, right? So, of course, Trump had to come out and say, yeah, this has gone too far. This is too far. And that's the other issue happening that is bringing this issue to the fore again, is that Trump is now saying that he believes that abortion should be left to the states. So he keeps, going all over the place on this, but that's where he's at right now. I tend to think that's probably the right move. I mean, that's where it's at right now, right? Is we have Roe v. Wade being overturned. The only thing it did was send it back to the states to let the states decide. So yeah, I'm pro-life, and I think abortion is murder, and I think it's hideous. But I don't know that the federal government is the place to legislate this, simply because we do have so many different views on it around the country. But anyway, either way, now abortion has become a big issue again. So I went to my Facebook radio group today. If you have not joined us, go find Annette on America radio show Facebook group and weigh in. I conduct polls every day, or 6 days a week at least, and I ask my faithful listeners what they think about the issues. And so today I asked, Trump says abortion should be left to the states. Arizona just okayed a strict abortion law. How much will the abortion issue play into the upcoming election? 44% said a lot, 55% said a moderate amount, and 1% said a small amount. And I think probably the comment that I agree with the most comes from Chris B., who said, I think the press will try to make a big deal out of it to help distract from the state of the economy and immigration and Israel and Ukraine and Biden's mental health. Bingo, I think he's right on. But also because abortion has proved to be a winning issue on the left. For some unfathomable reason, a lot of women really think it's important to maintain their right to kill their own child. Like, I will seriously never understand it. If you are a woman who considers yourself to be conservative or moderate, and you think that women absolutely have got to retain their right to killing their own child, let's just carve out the exceptions for rape or incest. I think, or the life of the mom. I think most of us, even on the right, say yes, that's reasonable. If you feel like women should have more than that they need to have unfettered rights to abortion or up to 15 weeks or whatever, I'd like to hear from you as a woman. Shoot me an email at Annette@AnnetteTalks.com. If you make a good argument, maybe I'll have you on my show, because I really, really, really want to know what motivates women to be so adamant that they maintain that right to kill their own child. And that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. So don't try and pretend like it's not. Okay. So this next story, I just really wanted to talk about. It's not terribly political, but it's a very important story. It's an illegal story, but it's something that I think most parents should be interested in. So I don't know if you've been following this story about Ethan Crumbley, school shooter. His parents were sentenced to up to 15 years for his fatal school shooting. This is the first time this has ever happened. Ethan Crumbley's parents were sentenced to between 10 and 15 years behind bars Tuesday for their son's 2021 massacre that left 4 students dead, the first time parents have been sentenced in a U.S. mass school shooting. James and Jennifer Crumbley were handed down the prison time by Judge Cheryl Matthews in a Pontiac, Michigan courtroom after they were found guilty on involuntary manslaughter charges at separate trials in March and February, respectively. These convictions are not about poor parenting. These convictions confirm repeated acts or lack of acts that could have halted an oncoming runaway train, about repeatedly ignoring things that would make a reasonable person feel the hair on the back of their neck stand up, Matthews said before announcing the sentences. And they have a picture of this kid, Ethan Crumbley, who, I have to say, looks a lot like one of the kids I used to teach when I taught 7th and 8th grade for the short but very intense time period that I taught. The convictions are the first time in U.S. history parents have been held accountable for a school shooting carried out by their child. They were convicted for failing to intervene despite obvious warning signs their son was troubled and for failing to keep a gun locked away in their home. The judge blamed Jennifer for glorifying owning guns and for her dispassionate and apathetic attitude toward Ethan. Each of the defendants' gross negligence has caused unimaginable suffering to hundreds of others, the judge said. Prosecutors had asked Judge Matthews to put James, 47, and Jennifer, 46, away for at least 10 years for the rampage that killed 4 students, injured 6 more, and also injured a teacher at Oxford High School on November 30th, 2021. Both parents who've been locked up for the past 2.5 years since their arrests asked for no additional prison time. Jennifer requested she be released with GPS tracking to live with her lawyer. I'm surprised her lawyer would be interested in having that happen. Speaking before the sentencing, Jennifer, wearing black and white jail clothes, was allowed to address the court where she said she had found God and claimed she had no idea what her son was capable of. She said, "The gravity and weight this has taken on my heart and soul cannot be expressed in words. Just as I know there is nothing I can say to ease the pain and suffering of the victims and their families. If I even thought my son would be capable of crimes like these, my actions would have absolutely been different. He was not the son I knew when I woke up on November 30th. The Ethan I knew was a good, quiet kid." James, wearing orange jail scrubs, was also given an opportunity to speak from the defense table where he emotionally apologized for the pain and agony his son had caused. "Part of you will be missing forever, but please know I am truly very sorry. I am sorry for your loss as a result of what my son did. I cannot express how much I wish I had known what was going on with him or what was going to happen. You know that what my son did. I was not aware of that, or he was planning it, or that he had obtained access to the firearms in my house. There is no evidence that suggested that," he said. Addressing Judge Matthews, he added, I'm simply going to ask that you sentence me in a fair and just way." Before the Crumbley parents spoke, family members of the slain students, Justin Schilling, Madison Baldwin, Hannah St. Juliana, and Tate Meyer, told the judge about the devastating toll the shooting had on their lives. Okay, so this is a hard thing. At the trials, the jurors heard testimony about how the parents went to the school the day of the shooting to discuss a violent drawing found on Ethan's math assignment with officials. The picture showed a gun, a bullet, and a person bleeding with the words, "Blood everywhere," and "The thoughts won't stop, help me." But James and Jennifer didn't take Ethan, then 15, out of school that day, instead returning to work after the school gave them a list of mental health services, according to trial testimony. Staffers didn't insist that Ethan be removed from school grounds, but they also weren't aware that the parents had bought their son a Sig Sauer 9mm handgun only 4 days earlier, which looked like the gun in Ethan's drawings, jurors learned at the trial. Ethan, now 17, copped to murder and terrorism charges and is serving a term of life imprisonment without parole. All right, so I asked my Facebook group again about this topic and whether or not parents should be held legally responsible for the actions of their children, and I linked to this article. And 17% said yes, 40% said no, 43% said circumstances alter cases. So, a few of the comments. One person said, yet another attempt to pin the blame on someone, make someone pay at all costs. Someone else says, in most cases, I would say no, but in this case, I agree with the verdict in large part based on the fact that the parents bought the kid a gun and didn't properly monitor the child's mental health. Another listener, I hate the guilt by association mentality. Are there instances where a parent should be tried with the child? Yes, but this is not one of them. Should the weapons have been locked up? Probably. Did the parent say, here, take this gun and this ammo, and told him to do it? No, in the end, the perpetrator was the person pulling the trigger. Another listener, depends on the circumstances. That's why there are trials and juries. I think this is a very difficult case. And obviously, I'm not a juror. I don't know all the facts behind it. As a parent, I've got a difficult child. She doesn't do the kinds of things that this kid, I don't see bloody drawings or whatever, but I have a difficult child. And she often does not listen to me, which is why she's now living with her father. She's decided that she's not going to allow me to parent her. And since she's not going to listen and abide by my rules, she's going with the parent who she will listen to because she's got to be parented. So I look at that and I think, geez, what if she did do something stupid? I do everything on my part. I do everything in my power, right? But everything in my power may not stop her. It's not going to stop her from doing what she wants to do. So that's the one hand. I would hate to be held legally responsible and go do prison time because I have a kid who is extremely strong-willed and decides to go and do something. It's something else I've learned as a parent, which I already knew because I was a teenager. Parents don't know everything. They don't know probably half of what their kids are up to. Or we think we know everything. We think we know most of what they're doing. We really don't. Because that same child shares with me things. I'm like, what? What? You're doing that? Why? So the parent to me says, no, that's wrong. We're never going to have full control over our children. The parent in me that has children at school who could be injured by a school shooter says those parents absolutely had a responsibility to do something if they knew that their kid was troubled. But the only thing I see from this story is that they knew he was troubled on the day that he shot the school. And they took the list of mental health providers. I don't know if they were going to do something about that or not. I don't know whether they ignored big warning signs. I also know that getting a kid to sit in a therapy is hard by firsthand experience. I know that if a kid doesn't want to be in therapy, it doesn't matter. All the therapists in the world aren't going to make a difference. But I also know that they bought their kid a gun. Did they know their kid had issues when they bought that kid this gun? I don't know. So this is a really difficult question. I would love to hear from you if you have an opinion on this. This really, it's a tough one. All right, next. We've got so much going on again, not living in boring times. Okay, so here, I've got a few good news stories here that I want to share before I get into some more heavy stuff. EVs, electric vehicles, are decreasing in popularity. Can I tell you, I went on a trip. I went on a trip this weekend, and we had to rent a car. And trying to save money, went with what they called the manager's special, which was just basically they're going to give you whatever car they want to give you, right? I thought nothing of it. Whatever. It's just there's just two of us in this car. Give us a small car. We're not going very far. Whatever. I don't care. Give me a small car. So I get there, and it's not that they're giving me a small car. They're going to give me an electric vehicle. Well, I've never driven an electric vehicle. I have no idea how long the charges last. I have no idea where to charge up. But where we were going to drive from 2 hours from the airport to the city we were going to get to, honestly, I have no idea if that one charge would get us 2 hours. And I certainly did not want to worry about that on a weekend trip. So what happens? Of course, we have to pay extra to upgrade from an electric vehicle to a gas-powered vehicle. That really chapped my hide, I can tell you right now. Absolutely ridiculous. I had to pay an extra $50 to go from an electric vehicle to a gas-powered vehicle. So yeah, not popular. I also read someplace that Hertz is doing nothing at all but electric vehicles for their rentals. If that's true, I predict bankruptcy for that company because there aren't enough people renting electric vehicles to keep them going. That's my personal prediction. So anyway, a recent Gallup poll has found that despite the Biden administration's push to get the country driving electric vehicles, the vast majority of Americans aren't buying into the EV-only future. Indeed, fewer Americans are sold on EVs than the prior year, as almost half, or 48%, said they would not consider buying an EV this year. Last year, 41% of Americans said they would not consider an EV. On the flip side, the number of Americans who would seriously consider buying an EV has dropped from 55% last year down to 44% today, probably because the truth keeps trickling out. As hard as, these big tech companies try to squelch the truth, it keeps coming out, little by little. Electric cars are too big. They're too heavy. Parking garages aren't meant for them. Even the freeways, the highways, we don't know how they're going to handle it. They're heavy. The batteries are too expensive. If you crash the car and you have to replace the battery, it's hugely expensive, which drives the cost of insurance up. Everything. They're not environmentally friendly, like we're told. They don't go very far on the charge. There aren't enough charging stations, and there aren't going to be enough charging stations. And that's ignoring the fact that we should be free to pick the car that we want to buy. So that's all trickling out, right? Anyway, the poll was conducted after Joe Biden's EPA presented its strictest emissions regulations yet, which equate to a de facto EV mandate designed to force 56% of new car sales to be EVs by 2032. Gallup observed, unless that market expands greatly in the next few years, it is unlikely auto companies doing business in the U.S. will be able to meet the emissions targets laid out by the Biden administration. Those targets may need to be relaxed further if Biden is reelected, or they may be done away with under a second Trump administration. I guarantee you, if Trump is elected, those are done away with. We're done with that nonsense. And we can go back to driving cars that actually work, because that ties into this other study that says natural gas is the best source for reliability, affordability, and environmental impact. A new study finds that natural gas is the most effective energy source meeting growing energy demands affordably and reliably while balancing environmental and human impact. The Grading the Grid study by the Mackinac Center for Public Policy, a pro-free market nonprofit, and Northwood University rates natural gas, coal, petroleum, nuclear, hydroelectric, wind, solar, and geothermal generation sources on their reliability, environmental and human impact, cost, innovation, and market feasibility. Natural gas got an A grade, followed by nuclear, which got a B+. Wind and solar energy came in last, each receiving F grades according to the study. Natural gas, the study explains, is best suited to integrate with the intermittency inherent with wind and solar power, which only produce electricity under the weather conditions. Gas provides a reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean source of energy in both traditional and carbon-constrained applications, the study stated. The study rated nuclear as the best of all worlds for its safety, abundance, and reliability, as well as its ability to deliver electricity without carbon emissions. And yet, we seem to not be making much headway with nuclear. The main challenge nuclear faces, according to the report, is its upfront costs and concerns about storage of nuclear waste. The study notes that this waste has been stored at reactor sites in dry casks that withstand a direct hit by missiles traveling 600 miles per hour. The spent fuel may also be a fuel source for reactors currently under development. Coal rated high in the study for abundance, affordability, and reliability, but it lost points for its high level of pollutant emissions and carbon dioxide. With U.S. gas producers hitting record high production that drives down gas prices, the study notes coal is facing stiff competition. Hydroelectric received a B- grade while it produces reliable energy without carbon emissions. The expansive nature of hydroelectric facilities make permitting new developments in the U.S. unlikely, which limits its potential to meet more demand. Wind and solar don't produce carbon dioxide emissions by themselves, but the study rates renewable energy low for other environmental and human impacts. Because wind and solar energy require large amounts of land to produce the same amount of energy as other forms, the study explains there are environmental impacts from the space they take up, which includes harm to wildlife. That's something else we saw in our drive through the desert this weekend. Lots and lots of solar. It takes a lot of room for solar panels. The study also calls into question the ability of renewable energy to reduce emissions. Since they require backup from reliable sources, which is often natural gas, they aren't drivers of major reductions. While the fuel for wind and solar is free, the study states there are other costs associated with addressing their inherent intermittency, which make them the most expensive forms of energy of those the study examined and the least reliable. The study concludes that policies pursuing a rapid transition away from conventional, reliable sources will have a negative impact on human health and the well-being of an energy-abundant society. Advocates for wind and solar hold them up as essential to environmental and climate health. However, rushing a system-wide transition to these untested and unreliable energy options puts humans' lives and North American economy at risk, that study concludes. In other words, duh. Stick with what we know works. And with that, we will be right back. All right, welcome back to Annette on America. And if you missed any of the last half hour, go find it. We talked a lot about a lot of great things. Oh, speaking of which, from the last half on solar energy, when the sun was eclipsed by the moon, lots of power was lost. There's actually a story all about it. But, I mean, it just goes to show, when the sun takes a little vacation, your energy production also takes a little vacation if you're relying on solar. Right? Natural gas, petroleum, they don't take those vacations when the sun does. So, a couple of interesting stories on the economy. What's funny is that there's a story in I think it was the Washington Post, that said, let's just take a little detour over to, what's wrong with the economy? It's not the Washington Post, it's the Wall Street Journal. What's wrong with the economy? It's you, not the data. That's the Wall Street Journal. They're telling us that we are stupid. So this is from my new Not the Sharpest Knife in the Drawer segment. So I would put the Wall Street Journal as one of the less sharp knives in the drawer this week, because they're basically saying we're just dummies. Our economy is doing just fine. It's just that we're stupid. So when we go to the grocery store and we get about $80 worth of groceries for $100, $100 would have gone 20% farther just like 4 years ago. It's us. It's not the data. It's not the groceries. It's not inflation. It's us. But let's look at some other dummies. We got a solar eclipse. We've got the earthquake. Also, I learned that cicadas are coming for the first time in like 100 years. All those things together would maybe lead one to believe that climate change exists. That's Sunny Hostin from The View, right? So she thinks that the eclipse and the earthquake in New Jersey, which happened to be along a fault line, and the cicadas, those are all from climate change. So just when you think the view couldn't get any more stupid. I experienced my first earthquake in New Jersey. We never get earthquakes. The climate crisis is real. That's from New Jersey Senate candidate Christina Amira Khalil. Biden has the wisdom, the judgment, and the temperament to take on difficult, complex situations like the one we're facing in the Middle East. That's from Biden campaign communications director Michael Tyler. Yeah. There is no one who has a better grasp of global issues of world affairs than President Joe Biden. There is no one who has the same level of respect on the world stage than Joe Biden does. That's from Biden campaign finance chair Rufus Gifford. So the people that think Biden is the bomb are the ones who depend on him for a paycheck. That's what that means. Because nobody else out there who's not depending on him or who isn't a total moron thinks that Joe Biden is some kind of a world politics genius. Right, this is the guy that can't even remember who is the prime minister of France or Germany. Anyway, okay. Also in the not too bright corner here. Oh, this is a great one. Democratic Congresswoman suggests black people be exempt from paying taxes as form of reparations. The reparation discussion is just never going to go away as long as we have politicians that are trying to score points and they're pandering. That's just never going to stop. A Democratic Congresswoman is calling for black Americans to be exempt from paying taxes as a form of reparations, though she admitted that the plan may not work because many poor black people aren't really paying taxes in the first place. I don't know if I really need to go on with that story, but I do have to point out one other thing. There's some pictures of her, and she's got these really long fake nails. This is just a pet peeve of mine. I was in Vegas over the weekend. That's where I flew in. I flew in, and then I drove to St. George. But while I was in Vegas, I saw 3 different women. One of them who was the car rental lady, the same one that made me upgrade in air quotes, from an electric vehicle to a gas-powered vehicle, which kind of admits that it's a better car, doesn't it? If you have to upgrade to it, doesn't that mean it's better? Right? That's the implication. Anyway, she was one, then there was a lady on a rental car bus, and then there was a lady somewhere else, I don't remember. But they all had these long, I swear, 2-inch, maybe not, maybe 1.5 inches long fingernails. Fake, obviously. They're so long they start curling at the end. And I just think, when is this just a Vegas thing? Why is this in style all of a sudden? And how does that lady type? How do you do anything with those nails other than scratch someone's back? I just don't. I mean, sure, if you want to scratch my back with those nails, I'll allow it. Because I love getting my back scratched. It's one of my favorite things. But how do you type? How do you do anything, really? I just wonder. That's just a deep thought. Anyway. So, but speaking of the economy, it's actually not doing well, despite what the Wall Street Journal would have you say. The American economy is not at all right. But to see why, you need to look beyond the dramatic numbers we keep seeing in the headlines and establishment talking points. Take, for instance, the latest jobs report. For the 3rd month in a row, the American economy added significantly more jobs than most economists had been expecting, a total of 303,000 for March. On its face, that's a good number. So if you stopped right there, if you're your regular low-information voter who just gets talking points on TikTok or wherever, then you're like, yeah, we have a good economy. Even if I do have to spend 20% more to buy groceries and gas is way up and rent. But things don't look as strong when you dig into the data. For instance, virtually all the jobs added are part-time jobs. Full-time jobs have actually been disappearing since December of last year. In fact, the year-over-year measure of full-time jobs has fallen into recession territory. Also, most of these new part-time jobs are going to immigrants, many of whom are in the country illegally. There has been zero job creation for native-born Americans since mid-2018. While immigrants are not harming the economy by working, the scale of new foreign-born workers has papered over the employment struggles of the native-born population. Further, government jobs accounted for almost a quarter of those added. That's bad. Way above the standard 10 to 12%. Just like with government spending and economic growth, government hiring boosts the official jobs numbers while draining the actual value-producing economy. Some economists like Daniel Lacalle argue that the U.S. economy is already experiencing a private sector recession, but that government spending and hiring are propping up the official data enough to hide it. So this is something that the federal government does, in part because they want to help Biden get reelected. Let's make it look like we have more jobs by using government money to create jobs. And as a side note, let's use government money to pay off student loans and bribe those younger voters who are not very motivated to get out there. A recession is inevitable thanks to the last decade of interest rate manipulation by the Federal Reserve, and especially to its dramatic actions during the pandemic. The recession-like conditions in full-time jobs is further evidence that Lacalle is right. But jobs numbers are only part of the story. The stock market has been fluctuating a lot recently, not because of changing consumer needs or the adoption of some new technology, but based on what the Federal Reserve officials are saying about what the central bank will do this year. At the same time, prices are still high, and they continue to rise at a rate that frustrates even some of President Joe Biden's biggest economic cheerleaders. As I mentioned earlier, our dollars are worth about 20% less than they were 4 years ago. I mean, think about it. That's huge. 20% in 4 years. Are you making 20% more income than you were 4 years ago? No, me neither. With no prospect of that trend reversing, that hurts. But instead of addressing this economic pain, much less their role in creating it, members of the political class are still pretending that everything is great. They're even gearing up to make things worse by, for example, sending even more of our money to the Ukrainian government, who, by the way, is spending it on things like beach homes, really fancy cars. All to prolong a war it's losing, not because of lack of money, but because of a lack of soldiers. And at home, President Biden is scrambling to put the brakes on energy production and to transfer money from the working class to his base of college graduates, all before he's up for re-election in November. Predictably and appropriately, the establishment's head-in-the-sand economic strategy is coinciding with a notable decrease in support for the Democrats, the establishment's preferred party these days. President Biden is behind in the polls in 6 of the 7 swing states and is losing support from working class and non-white voters. The political establishment and its preferred candidates deserve to lose support, not only for failing to acknowledge America's economic problems, but for causing them in the first place. Amen. So, all signs, except for the abortion issues, point to the Democrats losing in the next election, assuming we don't have, runaway cheating, which, you never know. Another interesting story that I have to share is the crony capitalism in California around the minimum wage law. I don't know if any of you have heard this. This is the first time I'm hearing. I knew that they raised the fast food restaurant franchises minimum wage to $20 an hour, but I didn't know that they had a little carve out there. First of all, I've been hearing about people losing their jobs. Duh. This is another thing that this should really, I forgot to switch out of my least sharp knife in the drawer segment, but technically I'm still kind of there because Minimum wage is stupid. Establishing a minimum wage is dumb. It's just price fixing. It's wage control, which never works. Anything that goes against the free market determining these things doesn't work. So this law will threaten 700,000 jobs by destroying the state's food franchising business. However, there is one notable fast food franchise exempted from this minimum wage hike: Panera. Greg Flynn is the second largest Panera franchisee in the world, but he is also known for his close relationship with, you guessed it, California Governor Gavin Newsom. So let's start right there. Greg Flynn, second largest Panera franchisee, Governor Gavin Newsom, good buds. This relationship stretches back to their high school years and presently takes the form of support and donations to Newsom's political campaigns. Okay, so Greg Flynn, second largest Panera franchisee in the world, big good buddy of Newsom, gives him cash for his political campaigns. With this close relationship well documented, it is clear that there is more to this exception, as a recent article by Bloomberg speculates. When pressed on this exemption by a number of California Republicans, the Newsom administration denied any crony dealings, labeling these accusations as absurd. That's absurd. Just because there's smoke doesn't mean there's fire, people. The administration maintains that Panera will not be exempt from the law. To make matters worse, Flynn had met with Newsom staffers prior to the final passage of the law and was allegedly surprised that the exemption made it into the final version of the bill. There is one thing that is not surprising about this ordeal, and that is how much Newsom and Flynn are denying accusations of cronyism. They would deny collaboration under any circumstances, no matter how obvious it may seem. So you're asking, well, how can they exempt just one restaurant chain? Well, it provides that fast food restaurants pay the new minimum wage, defining fast food restaurant as a limited service restaurant in the state that is part of a national fast food chain. But here's the kicker. Fast food restaurants shall not include an establishment that on September 15th, 2023, operates a bakery that produces for sale on the establishment's premises bread, as defined under Part 136 of Subchapter B of Chapter 1 of Title 21 of the Code of Federal Regulations, so long as it continues to operate such a bakery. This exemption applies only where the establishment produces for sale bread as a standalone menu item and does not apply if the bread is available for sale solely as part of another menu item. Sure sounds like Panera, doesn't it? According to Panera's own website, they do have a bakery that has numerous standalone bread items for sale. Additionally, some menu items such as French baguette are described as freshly baked, implying that the so-called bakery produces the bread for sale on the premises. All right, anyway, this is just... this is terrible. I mean, it's not surprising at all, given who Newsom is. But have you ever seen a more naked case of crony capitalism than in this whole deal? So if you happen to live in California, you might want to write a little email to your governor and tell him you think that his deal for Panera stinks. And by the way, I'm going to be going to Panera anyway. The last time I went there, I think I paid $30 for my daughter and I to eat. And I had a bowl of soup with some of that bread that makes them exempt from this minimum wage. And my daughter had a salad. Not cheap, okay? And so this Panera is more expensive than even McDonald's has become recently, and yet they're going to pay their people less. So the whole thing stinks to high heaven. Just saying. All right, so let's see. I wanted to do a couple more not the sharpest knife in the drawer comments here. What else we have? Oh, this is a funny story. Scrabble. Scrabble makes historic change to game with less competitive, inclusive version to appeal to Gen Z. Did you know Scrabble is too competitive for Gen Z? So they're making this double-sided version where one side has the original game for those who want to stick to the long-time traditional version, and one side with less competitive version to appeal to Gen Z. The side for Gen Z, called Scrabble Together, will include helper cards, use a simpler scoring system, be quicker to play, and allow people to play in teams. Okay? Is it just me, or is it just the dumbed down version? I think that's awfully sad that Scrabble thinks that they need to dumb down their game and promote that to Gen Z. Pretty sad, really, when you think about it. All right, so I have time for one more story. Well, except for my last, of course, Babylon Bee, which is always my favorite. But as always, if you have missed any of this episode, go to AnnetteTalks.com, YouTube, Rumble, or any podcast provider. And if you want to be a promoter on my show, you want to sponsor my show, send me an email at Annette@AnnetteTalks.com and we'll talk. All right, this last big story. Biden and Trump battle over the deep state. Remember when Rush Limbaugh, he was the one that first came out and was really talking about the deep state, which was from a book that he read, and he was really the one to make that term, coin that term, or make that term popular. And now we've seen numerous examples and proof and evidence that the deep state exists, if we didn't know that before. The deep state has been getting a makeover of late. Don't be fooled. A recent New York Times video piece might be called Exhibit A. It begins with a sinister voice. Donald Trump is obsessed with the deep state, and many Republicans are widening his paranoia. Then it spends the next 5 minutes taking a trip across America to poke fun at Trump, telling us that the deep state is really just NASA scientists saving us from asteroid annihilation, EPA administrators getting the lead out of our drinking water, and Department of Labor directors keeping our kids from working in slaughterhouses. In other words, just these really great folks over there in the federal government saving us, right? It's a clever piece, but a deceptive one. Because for every conscientious public servant like Scott Bellamy, Radhika Fox, and Nancy Alcantara, there are a dozen Kevin Kleinsmiths, Eric Ciaramellas, Alexander Vindmans, and Miles Taylors, all, if you don't know any of those people, look them up, all bent on undermining efforts at reform and thereby preserving what they have. As former Congressman Jason Chaffetz wrote in his 2018 book, The Deep State, How an Army of Bureaucrats Protected Barack Obama and is Working to Destroy the Trump Agenda, the deep state is a vast, self-perpetuating bureaucracy whose aim is singular, to exist again tomorrow and the day after, to replicate itself, to be indestructible and nearly impossible to disrupt. In other words, like cockroaches, right? Anyone that's done any study of political science knows that bureaucracy, one of the biggest problems with bureaucracy is that it is self-perpetuating. It's designed that way, right? It's supposed to keep running no matter who's in office. So it's got all sorts of protection around it. Like you can't, try getting a bureaucrat fired, right? Think about it. Had Hillary Clinton or, work with us, Jeb Bush been elected in 2016 instead of Donald Trump, we'd never have heard of the names Kevin Kleinsmith, Eric Ciaramella, Alexander Vindman, and Miles Taylor. And we'd have been treated to the same old status quo, a government that long ago lost its way. Given this, it's understandable that Trump wants to destroy the deep state, wants to get rid of the anti-reform saboteurs that will otherwise infect his administration and threaten to bring it down just like they attempted. I will shatter the deep state and restore government that is controlled by the people, he said, adding, either the deep state destroys America or we destroy the deep state. This laudable goal, though, is much easier said than done. Trump's second-term agenda does include a detailed plan for dismantling the deep state. reissuing a 2020 executive order restoring the president's authority to fire rogue bureaucrats, overhauling federal departments and agencies, firing all of the corrupt actors in our intelligence apparatus, establishing a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to declassify and publish all documents on deep state spying, censorship, and abuses of power, cracking down on government leakers who collude with the media to create false narratives, making all inspectors general independent from the departments they oversee. That's like should have happened a long time ago, and more. The task seems monumental. But with Trump's agenda coupled with the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, it's at least encouraging that conservatives have been giving it plenty of thought. As we noted back in December, we wish him well. Still, the left is taking Trump seriously, so much so that it's taken to writing apocalyptic op-eds on behalf of the deep state. As Donald Moynihan, a professor of public policy at Georgetown, writes of Trump's plans, this is not an empty threat. He has a real and plausible plan to utterly transform American government. It will undermine the quality of that government, and it will threaten, wait for it, our democracy. Joe Biden and his handlers know what's at stake, and they too have joined the fray. Late last week, Team Biden finalized rules that are meant to protect the jobs of untold thousands of federal bureaucrats just in case he wins the election on November 5th. As the Washington Times reports, Mr. Biden said his rules would insulate employees from such political pressure by making it tougher to reclassify their jobs and then fire them. Day in and day out, career civil servants provide the expertise and continuity necessary for our democracy to function, Mr. Biden said. This rule is a step toward combating corruption and partisan interference to ensure civil servants are able to focus on the most important task at hand, delivering for the American people. Whatever, dude. Toward the end of his administration, Trump sought to reclassify certain civil service workers because it's become near about impossible to fire poor performers, resistors, and saboteurs. This Schedule F order was promptly revoked by Joe Biden when he took office. Imagine that. As the Times continues, Biden's new rule, which was finalized Thursday by the Office of Personnel Management, will make it tougher for Mr. Trump or another administration, but not impossible to surmount. To overcome a regulation, a president must either go through the rules-making process again, which can take months or years, or persuade Congress to pass legislation. Good luck overcoming a Senate filibuster, Mr. President. New York Times columnist Frank Bruni was perhaps a visionary of the coming battle, extolling the virtues of the deep state back in December 2020, back before Anthony Fauci was exposed for the lying, money-grubbing, narcissistic, Chi-Com apologist that he is. As Bruni wrote, President Trump was right about the deep state. Sort of. There exists in government people and forces rigged to foil disruption. Bruni was right about the deep state, sort of. There exists in government people and forces rigged to foil reform, not disruption. There, we fixed it for him. All right, well, gosh, people, vote Trump, right? All right, last but not least, news from the Babylon Bee. NASA sends a rover to search for intelligent life on the View. NASA scientists who launched the mission in an attempt to answer the age-old question of whether or not intelligent life existed on the set of the popular daytime talk show remained skeptical that any evidence would be found. From what we've seen so far, it doesn't look good, said Dr. Edgar Barnhouse, who led the research team. Rumors have always existed that there may be intelligent life on the View, but until now we've never encountered any concrete proof. This mission was intended to answer the question once and for all. So far, our sensors have detected nothing. Viewers were eager to learn the results of the rover expedition. I've always been a bit of a conspiracy theorist, said Janelle Parker, who has watched the show since its inception. For years, I've pondered the existence of intelligent life on the View, but everyone thought I was crazy. Chances may be slim, but I'm holding out hope that they can find proof. Early reports indicated that the rover had yet to encounter any sentient creatures. Nothing of note has been revealed, Barnhouse said, just a pile of organic goo called a Whoopi Goldberg and some old fossilized remains that have been identified as once being Joy Behar, but nothing intelligent. At publishing time, NASA said the mission would also explore the studio to learn whether or not it truly was once inhabited by the enormous, vicious beast known as Rosie O'Donnell. And of course, we are now out of time. So I say thank you all for listening to Annette on America, where freedom lovers gather.